our entire team here and for this roundtable, and just want to welcome all of our viewers around the world. The goal is to make this really interactive and fun, so please fire away with questions. We've got Joaquin from Buenos Aires, Eric from New York, Rebecca in the UK, Josh. I think you're in New York.
I am in New York.
Yeah, Neil from the UK. So like people all over the place, and you know, the goal today is just to take your questions and see what's on everyone's mind here as we wind up this very bizarre year of 2020. Neil, you sent around some thoughts, some questions. How about I'll steal your question, which is, you know, what wine? What's a wine that kind of summarizes this year for you?
Shall I start off?
Yes, absolutely.
Please do.
I think for me the bottle, and it's going to be in my review of the year, was it was just a bottle of the Merceau Rougeau Cocherie 2010 that I drank in Chablis, just because it was the first bottle I had after lockdown, and just to sort of drink something kind of outside in France, just to forget a little bit about what was happening. It was sort of more than the wine. It wasn't the fact that it was an amazing Merceau or anything like that. It was just the fact that here I was drinking wine again and just enjoying it. And that's sort of my sort of most memorable wine this year.
Wow. Okay. Joaquin, what about you?
It happens more or less the same. It was a Chardonnay for me, and it was the first time I just ran out of my house for a tasting. And it was for my wine review a long time ago. If you just see from today, it was in May. But it was the first time I just leave my home for a tasting, and I enjoyed. And it's a Fossil Chardonnay 2018.
Wow, cool. Maybe we should post these at some point. I still haven't gone anywhere since March, so mine's going to be very different. Eric?
Well, you know, it's funny because when I first saw these questions, I spent a very large amount of time trying to actually think of the bottle that summed up 2020. And I was like, is this really what we want to talk about? But then I came to realize what it was, because it actually was a happy experience, but not at the moment. It was kind of a surprise. When this whole thing first happened, everything got closed down. I didn't have access to my storage, and I wasn't able to hold a lot of wine in my house. And so I had whatever had been most recently delivered. I had a case of Chateau de Tours, Côtes du Rhône, and Domaine de Tours Vaucluse. And it was literally like, went through those two cases of 15s over the course of like the first 4 months of the pandemic until storage was opened up again. And so it was certainly a very enjoyable wine to have over and over and over again, but it did get a little repetitive. But it's certainly my wine of 2020 at this point, those two.
Got it. Well, Eric, you definitely win the award for Home Decorator of the Year.
This is my wife, not me.
Yeah.
Guido
I don't know how she gets there. She just goes somewhere else every day. So
the Guido family wins the award, I think, for very seasonal decor. Rebecca?
Well, I've already had Eric up on the haircut for saying he had better hair than me. So he's got the best decoration and best hair. So obviously I'm a little bit disappointed about this from the very start. Very similar to the other gentleman, I had a really offbeat wine in a beautiful setting. We've not had many opportunities this year to go eat out and drink out and be guided by sommeliers this year. It's very much been home drinking, not going anywhere, doing lots of tasting at home, not going to the vineyards, which actually I've really missed. I do a lot of traveling usually, and I'm always like, I really want to be at home, but now I am desperate to go in the vineyard. And the wine I had was a restaurant in London, a relatively new restaurant, and fingers crossed it continues, that's been opened by Isabel, who's a master sommelier, called Trivet. And it opened up in the middle of the year this year, and the sommelier, a Greek guy, Kleros, who has always been a great supporter of mine, and we're great friends now. He showed me this wine at Liatikos, which I was like, a great variety, quite frankly, I had never heard of before. And it was transparent. It was almost sort of Nebbiolo-like in its transparency. It had beautiful tannins. And so he brought this Diamantikas Petali Liatikos, from Crete. That's a wonderful thing about wine, is that when you allow someone to guide you at a region that you don't know a great deal about, that they can give you such incredible surprises. And that wine has really stuck with me, as has that experience, because obviously we haven't been eating out and drinking out much this year. So those wonderful moments when you can share a meal and a glass of wine with friends is perhaps the highlight of a very not ordinary.
It's actually a Vinous table of that restaurant on the website, because I went there the beginning of the year.
Great restaurant.
Yeah.
Brilliant people.
Wow. I haven't been to a restaurant in God knows how long either. Josh, what about, well, you've got some very interesting eating habits lately, I have to say, but before I get into those, just tell us about the wine that summed up 2020.
Probably the one that summed it up was 1981 Jean Macla Chateau Chalon, which is a completely weird wine, intriguing, as Chateau Chalon usually is. But it was a bit of a struggle, sort of like 2020. But actually, for fun, it was a bottle of 2018 Chateau Tivin Côte de Brouilly that I drank on Thursday, March the 12th.
Oh, you have the date.
Yeah, in Lee. Well, because the 13th, I flew home on Friday the 13th. I think I spent most of the day of the 12th on the phone with Antonio. He was berating me to get out, and I actually got put on hold with British Airways for, literally 4 hours, and then they hung up on me. But I was able to fly out early in the morning of Friday the 13th, landed in New York.
That was the last day, right, Josh? That was the last.
It was.
Yeah.
It was the last day. So my last meal, traditionally, because I fly in and out of Lyon, I always start the trip and end the trip at Brasserie Georges, which is one of my favorite restaurants. Actually, it's probably not good to go there for lunch because you'll probably likely fall asleep at the wheel, given the richness of the food. But it's a wonderful place, and that was my last, I guess, what you could call fine dining experience. And I always drink Beaujolais there because it goes so well with the food. And that last bottle of 2018 Côte de Brouilly is sticking in my head, and can't wait to go back and do it again.
Well, we're going to come back to food in a second because we have a question about that. But I'll tell you what wine sums up 2020 for me. It's this is David Aber, Madrona Ranch 2017, because I think this is a year when the only way to, in my opinion, the only way to maintain sanity is to focus only on what is immediately in front of you and what you can control. And this is a wine I'm tasting this afternoon. So it sums up 2020 for me, because I think the only way you can deal with this, there's just so much uncertainty, even with this latest news out of the UK, there's just so much uncertainty that I think the only way you can kind of get through this situation is, again, just focus on what is immediately in front. And so what is immediately ahead of me this afternoon is a tasting of a bunch of Napa cabs, and I just grabbed this one, which is, I hope it's going to be a great wine, but I think it's really, the way that at least I've tried to think about this year is just sort of like, okay, what do I have to do today? What do I have to do like the next hour? And repeat. So anyway, so those are the wines for us that sum up 2020. So Josh, you mentioned beautiful brasserie in Lyon. So where will you go out to eat the first time you can travel? Where's your top place?
Probably Brasserie Georges. since I'm due, hopefully I'm overdue to get back to the Rhone and Beaujolais. And since Lyon sits right in between the two, it's the perfect place. There are also 3 wonderful hotels that are walking distance. It's right by the train station, so it's a little bit busy, very active. But yeah, that's when I can get in Europe. That's where I would go. And here in the US, if I make it back out to California, In-N-Out Burger.
Nice place.
Okay, Neil, this is your question. So what's your where are you going to go first place?
I don't know. I mean, I've got a significant birthday coming up in a few weeks, so I was sort of planning a few things for that. But that looks like nothing's going to go ahead. So I'll probably be celebrating that at home with a Chinese takeaway or something. So I'd like to go back to sorrel in Dorking, which was my sort of meal of the year, where I went a little bit like Josh was saying. It was my wife's birthday, so it was March the 17th. It was one of the last days when everyone was going out, and it was to compensate for not going to Rome. And it just happened to be one of the best lunches, best dinners I've ever had. It was absolutely amazing. It was just us and a couple of other people there, so I want to go back there and just see if it was good. The other thing I want to eat is Josh did a Vinous table. You know, the one with the pizza? I can't remember where it was.
Yes.
That's the most disgusting thing to look at I've ever seen in any sort of restaurant view. I've had 2 or 3 people say to me, "What was that pizza that Josh wrote about actually edible?" Because it looked all sort of burnt and sort of.
That's New Haven. That's New Haven. That was modern. That was modern, but that is the style in New Haven. Don't knock it till you try it.
I'm gonna try that then. Yeah.
It's fabulous. It is fabulous.
Just the other line.
Word for it.
Yeah, no, New Haven's easy because they're really just 3 places to go, and you get into big arguments about which is the best. They've all been there for close to 100 years.
Okay. Just to add a line about pizzas, you know that Buenos Aires is one of the pizza capitals in the world. It's weird, but it happens here. And a couple of years ago, I just organized a marathon to taste them. It was a 2,500 people marathon in Corrientes Street, where most of the main pizza houses are. It's very bizarre, and I truly invite you, if you come to Buenos Aires, especially, to eat some pizzas, because it's the opposite of what you have in mind from Italy. They are fat with a lot of cheese, so it's nothing that you have in mind, but it worth to be tasted. I invite you.
I have to say, Joaquin, every time I read one of your articles, it makes me want to get on the plane.
Okay, glad to hear that, because there's no
Every single time.
for the next month.
Because I've never been to Argentina, and every time I read one of your articles, I'm like, God, I just really want to get on a plane and go. And I want to go to some of those restaurants that you wrote about that have the older vintages.
Exactly.
For one, go visit some wineries, and I swear every time that's always the same response.
Well, you know who to ask. I mean, if you're willing to come, I can help you with the organization of the trip. Okay, we have two people here. Rebecca, you too.
Well, I think the next time we can do the Festa del Barolo in New York. Maybe we'll have to have a field trip to New Haven.
With pizza.
Boy.
Yeah, it's close. Only about an hour.
Exactly. So instead of going to some restaurant like the day before, maybe we'll go to New Haven and Josh can take us to the pizza places and we can compare and see if he really knows some stuff.
Anytime.
We have all the critics in town. You're also guys are welcome over here. I'll be happy to cook for y'all.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Who else? Rebecca, where are you going to go when we can get back to sort of semblance?
Go anywhere at the moment. I have not had a meal out since August. So anywhere will do for me. But I'm hoping. Well, I'm meant to be doing a Chenin Blanc tasting for you guys, to which the report should be out in February. Obviously, still touch and go whether I can make it. But there is a very sort of a humble but delightful restaurant in the centre of Sevilla, appropriately named Le Chenin. I'm hoping I can go there soon, at some point in the very near future. Otherwise, there's a Michelin-starred restaurant about an hour and a half from me in the Lake District, and I'm hoping Colon Clume. And I've got a table booked there, but who knows if I'll ever make it in the next week.
You'll make it.
I also have a significant birthday in March, and I've got a snowboarding trip booked in the French Alps, and I'm hoping to gorge myself on.
Cross
your fingers. Cross your fingers.
Who else is this? Eric, where are you going to go?
I can tell you immediately, it's Maialino. Best combination, in my opinion, of a wine list with some really great mature stuff and just really good, wholesome food and in a really comfortable environment and just great people that, people that know me know I'm always on some kind of weird diet. These people are always willing to accommodate in every way. And it's always I always swear it's just as good as everyone else's plate on the table. I can't tell you how much I miss that place. It's also a place when I think about it, I think about the amount of times I've been there with friends and had some really great tastings where the people were just as great as the wines in the table.
Yeah, so Maialino's in New York, for folks who don't know, and they have very reasonably priced wine list. I mean, that's where I shouldn't say what I like to drink there because everybody will pillage the list, but I'm gonna say anyway. They have very fair prices for Bordeaux. So that's where I drink.
Had some great 50s Barlotto there, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's the
So,
end of prices.
Joaquin, where are you gonna go?
Of course, I will go to Don Julio. I mentioned in the last piece about this amazing restaurant. They specialize on meat, of course, because they are from Argentina and the cows and whatever you can imagine about this specific restaurant. But they just gather big pieces for the barbecue, or asado as we call here, and have an amazing wine list from every corner of Argentina and from the 40s and on. So it's a place to visit, and it was recognized last month as the best in Latin America. We can doubt about that, but for sure you won't resist to visit it. It worth at least once in life to sit there.
Wow. Okay, well, I'm gonna put that on the list.
Yeah, it's your second list.
Okay, second place. We're missing Neil, right? Well, you said
No,
about
I've
the
said, yeah.
significant birthday. Yeah, so I guess it's my turn, right? Well, in New York City, my favorite restaurant, aside from Maialino's, La Bernardin. I don't know if it's going to be possible anymore, but what I used to do is a lot of times I would just go sit in a bar. So not like I would always end up. I would always say, "Oh, I'm just going to go order a dish or two," and then I'd end up ordering the whole menu. But they have these little tables, and I hope that they'll have them again in the bar area where you don't need a reservation. And a lot of times after a long day in the office, what I'd do is I'd walk by there and I'd see if there were tables available, and if there were, I'd go in. And I just love that place because they just do obviously a phenomenal job. And I think they've got a great wine by the glass program, because the philosophy there is to offer affordable glasses, wines by the glass. So you have this very luxurious meal, but Aldo and team always have wonderful wines by the glass that don't cost a fortune. And I just feel very, very comfortable and at home there. In California, I'm going to Gott's. I'm going to have 2 ahi burgers or 3. Sit outside. And then somewhere in Piedmont for sure, but not for truffles, which are great at everything. But my favorite time to go to Piedmont is really in June, because you have the longest days of the year and it doesn't get dark until like 10 o'clock at night. And since we've missed out so much on 2020, I want a couple extra hours in my day. So I'd go somewhere like in June, late June. You can sit outside, have a glass of champagne, the vegetables and all the food is wonderful. And it's just a great time to go. Everybody wants to go in the fall. It's great. But for me, I love going in the late and that sort of June timeframe because the light is just glorious. So we've got some questions here that are great. So I'm just going to go in order. This one's from Richard about what percentage of Vineyard acreage in Napa Valley was destroyed by the fires, and will it have to be regrown? So this is a very serious situation. We had 2 major fires, one in August and then one in September-ish. And it's very devastating. And in fact, as I'm writing the reviews of Napa Valley right now, I can tell you that these are the hardest tastings I've ever had to do. I mean, everybody on this call, if you've done this job for a certain amount of time, you see all sorts of horrible things. I remember going to visit growers in Burgundy the day after hail wiped out the harvest, and younger people even questioning if they wanted to make wine, because in vintages like 10 and 11 and 12, they were so hard. I remember you meet people who have illnesses and all sorts of family challenges and things that shouldn't happen, and that they're really, on a human level, really depressing and sad. But the destruction in California this year is just on a completely different scale. And of course, there was 17, so places like Mayacamas and Signorello, where I used to taste every year, they don't exist anymore. A lot of pieces of them don't exist. Buildings mostly in 17. So now here in 20, we have a much, much, much more serious situation. I would urge everybody who's listening or who's going to watch this on the replay to buy a bottle of California wine for the holidays, or give it away, drink it, whatever you want. But there's just widespread devastation, and you don't really know how much damage there is to vineyards until the spring. But I think that even so, even if vines survive to the spring and they start vegetating again, the risk is that with the first heat wave or shock event that they're going to die. There's going to be significant replanting. It is really tragic. So I don't have a precise answer, but everybody I've talked to in the virtual tastings that I've done, the first thing they'll say is, when you come out here, you're going to see it looks very different than what you remember. And it's just gut-wrenching. And there's a lot of wine that won't be made in 2020. This question is about California, but this is also applicable of Oregon, Washington. I don't know, because I don't follow it specifically in Oregon. I only know, Josh knows it, but a lot of wines that won't be made this year. And it's really, it is a real tragedy. So it's going to have a profound impact on these wineries for a long period of time. And it's not just the wineries, it's the entire economic ecosystem of tourism, of restaurants. And it's not just the owners of the vineyards, but you're talking about every person out there who makes, $15, $16, $17 an hour. Like, those people are the most impacted, and it is very, very serious. So on top of everything else that we've had to deal with COVID this year, we're looking at a pretty tough time. The only saving grace, quote unquote, for Napa Valley in particular, Sonoma, I'm not quite so sure about, but you have 2 years that were pretty abundant, 18 and 19, and I think people they'll manage their production smooth it over a year, a couple of years. But when vineyards have to be replanted, you're looking at a much longer time frame, and it's just going to be brutal for a while. So my message is, if you can, buy some California wine and support those growers, because they really need it. Josh, a question from Michael about the Southern Rhone, and if I'll read it. This is not my area of expertise. So I did have a 78 Jaboulet Hermitage last night, which was my idea of good.
That's one of the greats.
Yeah. In the Southern Rhone, are the days of single variety Grenache Noir premium wines likely to be eclipsed by the rise of Mourvedre and a return to Chateauneuf du Pape blends?
It's been happening with the hotter vintages. If you talk to most growers down there, they'll tell you that Grenache isn't happy until it makes a wine that's about 16% alcohol. And under that, they think that it's not fully mature grapes, which I don't necessarily I don't disagree. The problem now is that we got vintages where Grenache is pumping out wines that are anywhere from 17, even 18% natural alcohol, with also a drop in acidity, lack of structure. So Mourvedre in particular has been making some big headway. Syrah is actually in a lot of ways kind of on the way out, because it is an interloper. It really doesn't belong there. It came from the north, sort of a modern addition, where Mourvedre is a neighbor grape. In the case of Beaucastel, they were planting Mourvedre heavily over a century ago. So the answer to the question is yes, absolutely. Except for the really cool parts of Chateauneuf. And up in the hills, Gigondas and Vaqueras will always have a lot of Grenache. It's colder, more mountainous, and it can handle it. But in those flat areas in Chateauneuf, particularly on the southern end of the appellation, as you're heading towards Avignon, Grenache is rough there. It's just too ripe. But I think this is going to happen in a lot of all of our respective regions. I'm definitely seeing it. For example, I just finished up that big Paso article, and they are playing a lot with Graciano, which was a happy accident there, bringing some acidity in. And they are definitely conscious of how ripe things are. And Syrah, when it gets super ripe, can get a little weird. So I see in all the regions where I work, there is a kind of a race to get more elegance, more finesse, and Grenache, when it gets ripe, is not really finesseful. It's fun.
That's interesting. No, it'll be interesting to see it. It's true. This will play out a lot in a lot of areas. Neil lives if I read correctly, very close to some fantastic sparkling wine vineyards, which is just like hard to believe, right? It's unfathomable almost.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I was always a bit of a sort of cynic a little bit about English sparkling wine. I thought it was a little bit overrated for many years, but I think they got a lot better in the last 4 or 5 years. So there's some. I did a tasting earlier this year, a blind tasting of grower champagnes against English sparkling wines, which was really interesting. Completely blind tasting, just to not to distinguish whether you could identify them or not, but just like where the quality was. And a few of those English wines did pretty well against some pretty high scoring, individual grower champagne. So still need to write that up actually. But yeah, I mean, it's good stuff.
That's interesting. Well,
Bitter.
staying on this sort of theme for Neil and Rebecca, there's a question from Michael about what are the business risks for the UK wine trade in 2021 post-Brexit, and what's the impact likely to be on international markets as a result, if any?
What was the first line of the question? Sorry, I didn't catch
I'm
it.
going to read it again. Any comments about business risks for the UK wine trade in 2021 post-Brexit? What's the impact likely to be on international markets as a result?
All your houses.
How do you feel about that, Neil? Do you want me to have my 2 months worth, or do you want to go first?
You go first, Rebecca.
Yeah.
All right.
If you could speak a little louder, I think I'm at least having a little hard time.
If you're in the off-trade, so the off-premise market, you sell to the off-premise, you are in a great position. Obviously, there is a lot of uncertainty currently with Brexit in terms of port and access to port. However, if you're in the on-trade, there is still a great deal of uncertainty. Neil, you can't go out for a big meal. Basically, you can have takeaway, but you can't go out for a meal. So if you're exporting to the on-trade in the UK at the moment, you basically have zero business. However, if you do have off-trade business, we are drinking more than ever, apparently, according to recent news surveys. We haven't, despite the British decisions to get healthy and the start of lockdown and to eat healthily, we're just eating more crisps and drinking more wine than ever before. Whether that's fine wine or not is quite another thing, but having spoken to quite a number of fine wine merchants, they're actually doing quite well. If you're a high earner, you can't go on holiday at the moment, so you're spending your money elsewhere, and your money is often spent in things like handbags, art, fine wine. That's my.
And on-trade means restaurants, correct?
Yeah, the on-premise. I don't know what the lingo is in America. Sorry.
We call it on-premise. It's very close. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, basically, if you're in the on-premise, it's D-Day, basically.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of this is about shipping logistics, right, Neil? Isn't it about things not being able to move, not being able to physically transport, right, across borders? Yeah. A lot of the.
Yeah, and the thing is like nobody still knows, not even Boris Johnson knows what the deal is going to be, if there is going to be a deal at all. So what the hell? We've still got like 10 days left for the whole future of the country for generations to come. So take a break for Christmas. I don't know. I think they will. I think there's still a chance of them doing a deal at the end, and we'll have to see how that affects wine sales. But definitely, I think it must have a huge impact on sort of wine sales. But at the end of the day, we have the sort of, in the UK, we have for fine wine, we have the infrastructure and the contacts around the world as a sort of hub for sort of fine wine. So that's not really going to go away. And a lot of the sort of merchants have outposts in, Hong Kong or China or wherever. So, I'm sure it'd be fine, but sure it's going to be a massive impact. But as Rebecca said, in England, we've just drunk our way through this horrible year. So it's what we always do.
Well, I think, looking at, for example, the Joe Phelps cellar that was just sold by HDH a few days ago, but others also, the auction market is just really on fire for, wines that are considered collectible or rare or have really great provenance. The Del Posto cellar sale a few months ago set all sorts of really high watermarks for Italian wines. Burgundy, obviously, we know the names that are considered collectible. So I think, this is a theme that the high end of the market is really very healthy, or more than healthy. And we know also that the inexpensive wines, the supermarket wines, are flying off the shelf. If you talk to people in that part of the market, that's doing pretty well. I think it's the middle that's going to be more challenged. So
Certainly.
yeah.
I know a lot of people talking about getting into the wine retail business right now. It's interesting. It's one of the few businesses that seems to really be exploding now.
Yeah, it's always been defensive, and so yeah, for sure. When a lot of things are falling apart, it looks pretty good. So this is a really great question that I would love to get everybody's insights on. It's from Mike. I'm going to read it. It's a little long, but it's a really great question, which is, what is your advice to a young aspiring wine critic, i.e. launch your own newsletter, specialized versus broad coverage, etc.? One element I struggle with is the economics of the endeavor. With technology, it's easy enough to launch a website/newsletter, but what are your tips for getting access to wines to taste, i.e. reaching out to importers, trade events, visiting estates, live, etc.? I look back at Piedmont Report, for example, and there are hundreds of wines covered, which most young people wouldn't be able to afford to buy and taste. So this is a fantastic question, and I guess since Mike mentioned Piedmont Report, I'll start, but I think it's going to be great to hear 6 perspectives, because I think, Mike, you're going to get 6 different answers. So hopefully one of those will fit. But the first thing is specializing versus broad. So I think this is just my opinion, you're going to hear 5 other opinions, but if you ask me, you specialize. You specialize, you become really well known for being a specialist, and then you're considered a specialist, and then you can transfer your expertise. You're viewed as a specialist, and then you can transfer your expertise as a specialist across other areas. That's just what I would do. It happened to work for me. I did Piedmont first, then Italian wine, and when I wanted to expand to Champagne, I remember talking to Bob Parker. He said, talk to David. If he's fine with it, I'm fine with it. And that's basically what happened. And then the next major region that I started writing about was Champagne. And so it's been, and then it expanded from there. But it's about, I think, specialization, being respected as a specialist, and then transferring that expertise. As far as starting, I think this is an unbelievably challenging business to get started in. And since you asked about Piedmont Report, I tasted all of those wines in Italy, visiting the estates. Those wines are expensive now, but they weren't back then. So I recognize that creates an additional obstacle. There was a time when we were drinking Piedmont wine like Barolo every night. Today, it's not really possible so much. But I think that you also have to not depend a lot on trade groups, and you have to be able to be your own person. So I started Piedmont Report, visiting wineries on my own, making all my appointments, buying wines when I needed to. And then later it got picked up by the trade, but it was not in any way started with any trade tastings. I never went to those trade tastings. I never went to portfolio tastings, importer tastings. I never did any of that. Not because I didn't want to, but just because I wanted to have my own sort of thing. And I was also working a full-time job, so it was also a time issue. But that's what I would do. Specialize, find an area that you're really good on, that you really love, and then I think you have to just go and do it on site in these places, which I recognize is complicated now. And the other thing I would say is that it is economically daunting. And Vinous is 7 years old. I sometimes I think if I knew how hard it was, would I do it again? It's it's really, 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 really challenging, and it is a labor of love for everybody on here. But this is not like what I would advise as far as like making a lot of money in terms of there's a lot of things that are much more lucrative. So we do what we do. I think I can speak for everyone. We do what we do out of love, out of passion. But this is not the job that you choose if immediate short-term financial goals are your number one priority. So anyway.
I agree with you. That would be the best way. Not to start with the money at the end.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be the work. That's it.
But it'd be great to hear everyone's views, like specialization, because there's like a couple of really good questions in this larger question, which is like specialize or broad. because it could be 50-50, specialized versus broad. And then, what other advice would you guys have for, everybody's been through this. So what advice do you have? Joaquin, what about you? What would you, how would
I use in my work, I use the same strategy. I just specialize, of course, in my country because it's like a closed market, Argentina, if you want it. But I try to get an image of these wines in this country quite different of what the industry sells itself, So in my opinion, was very important to have an own opinion of what is going on here. And when I reached that line in my mind, I just focus on that line and I start working and writing. And I love to write. So for me, it was not the problem, the communication or the way to develop a style, but to gather specific wines and to reach specific producers and to get in that world took me a lot of time. And to have a clear idea of what I thought about the wines and what I thought about the Argentinian wine industry helped me focusing in this work. And after 20 years, well, here I am. I'm a critic. This is quite new for me too.
Yeah. So Eric, you had a different path. You started off in retail. What advice would you give?
Well, it's funny. I actually started my wine life in restaurants.
Yep. Yeah.
Like I said, don't quit your day job, right? I basically worked a day job for about 10 years while working in restaurants, slowly starting to write, starting with a blog, then retail, but building the catalog and making relationships and everything. I think, though, I agree with you 100% about focus, because if you're broad, it's going to take you forever to prove your palate to such a large audience. It's better. I think back to the days when when Antonio, with your old workplace, when you started reviewing Napa. And I remember there was a lot of what is Antonio Galoni going to think about California wine? But then when you came back with your opinions, and it was so much symmetry between like your Italian reviews and what you liked in Napa. It made so much sense. So it's like that progression. But I think the most important thing for anyone looking to start out right now is to consider the fact that the whole world has changed so much from when any of us started trying to become wine writers. And that the perspectives from producers and from PR companies and such are so different now. It's not difficult to get yourself started with a free website that you don't charge people to read, something along the lines of a blog. That's something you can very easily do. But then so many people want to put wine in front of someone who has an audience. Exactly. There are so many public relation companies out there that want to be putting these wines in front of people. So all you really need to do is you just need to start building that audience, whether they pay for it or not at first. Don't quit the day job. Establish yourself in that thing you love, the thing you have passion, sink your heart into it, do all the work, do all the research, prove yourself, and then expand from there. Because like I said, getting wine put in front of you these days is not difficult. It's just getting people to listen to what you have to say and then come back and come back and come back again.
Yeah, that's really good advice to sort of start your own website, because that's exactly what you did.
Yeah, I worked for an importer for 10 years, and then at the sort of same time I'd started Wine Journal, did that for 3 years before I joined the Wine Advocate at the same time as you, and then so yeah, it's like a long apprenticeship, but it's absolutely crucial. That's your learning. It's your learning period outside of the limelight. What's your regions you've got is your sort of you good at, and learning to write. I think a lot of people always say to me, oh, you've got the most glamorous job, and in a way, of course, they're right, but actually that's not the job. The job is, as I'm sure everyone else says, like hours and hours in front of the computer, writing, tasting note after tasting note. And then, for me, for the writing is as like Joachim was saying, it's like if I write something, why should someone be bothered to read it? Why should they read more than someone else? And why should they pay for it? And for that, you've got to, never be satisfied. Like the Burgundy report I just done, I wrote about 5,000 words that were never used in the intro just because I thought they just didn't work. So it's a lot of behind the sort of glamorous facade, there's a lot of hard work. But if you, as you say, if you have a passion for the job, then that gets you through all those late nights and the tears when it doesn't go right, and the long stretches of writing strawberry 3 million times, and another strawberry.
Or a line deal for Chablis.
Yeah.
But I read lots of people who are well-intentioned and who love wine but can't write. And I think I came through the journalism route. I took a job with a wine trade publication in the UK, and I've worked through there for the last 15 years. But I think it's really important that you can be the best taster in the world, but if you can't communicate what's in the glass, no one's going to read it. So I think that it's really important to focus on your communication. And from my perspective, so I just put myself through night classes because I had this trade job, and I put myself through night classes in terms of I can do sort of, I went on features courses, how to write, and I also went on shorthand courses, which is beautiful. If you're in a winery and you really hate their wine, you can write about their wine in shorthand, and they can't understand what you just said. It is a marvelous skill to have. But yeah, it's all about communication for me.
Right. Josh, you spent many years working in the trade as well, but on the import side, like Neil Rosenthal. So what advice would you have?
Well, I started off working retail. Actually, I had my first job summer of 1985 out of Martha's Vineyard at a wine shop. Then I unwisely went into the stock market business with an English degree. So when the market crashed in '87, I was the first out the door, along with my philosophy degree holding friends. Anyway, that got me into retail, where I had to be a generalist. I worked in DC, which is still very competitive, but in the 1980s, DC was probably as in many ways hotter than New York as a wine market. Reason for that being that the retailers in DC can have import licenses. So I worked with a company, actually with David Schilconnect, a store called Pearson's, and we did our own importing. So I developed relationships with different brokers. We did a lot of Bordeaux business. Bordeaux was big back then. So people like Bill Blatch, Christopher Cannon, who was Europe Van, was doing a lot of Bordeaux back then. I think he still is. And also Burgundy. David was a big Burgundy freak. So I started zeroing in on Burgundy because, again, we were working directly with Becky Wasserman. She just split up with Christopher Cannon and Kermit, Neil. That's how I met Neil Rosenthal. And that, as I get deeper and deeper into that prompted me to go work in Chassagne in 1989 and 1990, also up in Germany in Nierstein, because David obviously has a lot of serious German connections. And so I really zeroed in on Burgundy. So I agree that at some point you do have to become a bit of a specialist in something, but at the beginning, I think it's better to be a generalist, and then you'll find something that you're comfortable with. And if you're trying to communicate to people, they always say that if you're doing something you love, you'll do well at it. And it takes time. If you already know what you love, then I take Eric's advice, just go for it. Put something up, see if you can get people to pay attention, ultimately pay you. And once you start to establish that, then you will be noticed by producers, by importers, and they're going to say, hey, we want to get our wines in front of this person because they know what they're doing. They're passionate. It pays to be respectful, obviously, and as professional as possible. Really, I think the only thing you can do is just jump in, and make sure that you have enough knowledge so that when you're writing about things, I read, some chat boards and whatnot, and it amazes me sometimes. I'll see people that have been in there for 10 years and their ignorance is staggering, and they say things that are ask questions that I'd say, there's a thing called the Google, and you could look that up, and
it's quite new.
Oh, somebody somebody that you see they've posted 12,876 times or something like that, and they're asking, is Gamay allowed in Pasteugrand or something like that? And you just think, oh my God. So, definitely know what you're know what you're talking about, and be humble, right? I mean, it's like they say, the more you learn, the less you know.
Perfect. No, I think that one other thing has changed a lot for those of us who are older from the previous generation of critics. I mean, some of whom are still active, but just like the generation before, the Bob Parkers and the Steve Tanzers and such. And that is that the number of high quality wines in every region that we cover has just exploded in the last 15 or 20 years. So, 30 years ago, you might have, being a generalist was even possible. It was still a tremendous amount of work, but you could contemplate it because there were only a handful of notable estates in most regions, and then the quality dropped precipitously. Now, when I read articles that we publish, even the regions that I used to cover, I mean, like Josh, when I look at your articles, or when I look at Burgundy, and I just compare like the domains to like the domains that I know that I used to go to, and I like don't recognize just like so many of these names. It's just impossible to. I mean, it's just much more wine to taste these days, and that's another thing I think that argues for having a focus. So I'm curious, Rebecca, how important do you think it is to pursue title like MS or MW? And then we'll just ask, what our take is on the Court of Master Sommeliers and what's happened there lately, because I think it's important. But how
I think that depends who you are. Obviously, when I started pursuing, personally, I can only speak from personal experience, but when I started pursuing the MW, I think I was about 28. And at that time, I was a bubbly blonde, as I still am, but going to wineries, traveling to new countries, and being picked up by the winery representative or the regional representative, and they said to me, they're like, "Oh, you're the journalist?" I'm like, "Yeah." And every time I was having to prove myself, I thought, you know what? I need to go and get these qualifications because I'm sick of having to prove myself over and over again to people that I actually know about wine. And that, it turns out, as I started from when I started the MW to when I completed, it turned out I knew very little about wine when I started it. But it's made me a much better taster. It's made me think about wines in terms of quality and style as much as it is in the whole blind tasting game. It's not about the blind tasting game. It's about being able to assess wines and saying this is a powerful wine and it's top of the shop, or it's actually sort of mid-range, or it's entry level. That's what's really important here. That's what people want to know. I think it helps. I think it really helps. It really helps if you're trying. I can now walk into a Bordeaux chateau and I give them my card and they go, "Oh, you've got the MW." Oh, and therefore there is an assumed level of knowledge, which really helps and has made it a lot easier for me. Also, I am now employed by Vinous, so it's clearly helped.
We have one MW.
The new employee of 2020, it hasn't been an all bad year. But there is, I admit that it isn't the entryway for everybody. It is a really academic course. If you're not academically inclined, don't go down that route. But I'm a total nerd, so I love studying, and I am not ashamed anymore. Maybe I was when I was 15, but I am not ashamed to say I'm a nerd. I'm a cello playing nerd, and I'm happy with that, and that's okay. But if you're not academically inclined and you don't love studying, don't go down that route. There are many other routes to go down.
Anybody else have a view on this?
I do. Yeah, I think I mean I did like the diploma, like WSET diploma in the next stage to an MW, and then I thought about it, but number one, I'm not very good at exams. Number two, I didn't want to learn about Bulgarian Pinot Noir because life is only so long. Yeah, but I think like MW is for me. I mean, Rebecca can correct me. Like in terms of sort of buying, MW seems to be really an important thing. There's lots of buyers that are MWs and very good at. That seems to sort of fit into that sort of role. When it comes to wine critiquing, for me, it's much more on kind of the experience and have you tasted the benchmarks? Can you go to a very famous winemaker and say to them, your wine's not very good, you know, that, and write it and publish it and have a thick skin. And that's a different kind of thing that for me makes, you know, for wine criticism, that's the most important thing.
I think that's a personality trait. Have you got a thick skin, and do you dare call someone out on their wine and say, actually, it's not really very good, this wine? I think that's a personality trait. Personally, I'm going to totally contradict you there, but if you have got that, I think you can be a critic or a reviewer, whatever you choose to call yourself. The MW, I think, teaches you the ability, and it gives you the skills to actually try and deduce what is good and what is bad, and also put it in a market. But it does only teach you the top. You're not gonna learn the wines of the world from the MW. You have to be able to assess the classics. It's not about Bulgarian Pinot Noir, and it's not about Italian Pinot Grigio, and it's not about orange wine from Georgia. It's about knowing the classics and being able to select them and say, this is a really good example. It's not all great, but what other ways do we have at the moment? I'm obviously going to support the MW. But yeah, I would love to find I'm sure there are other ways you can do this, but that's the way I chose, and I think it has provided a bedrock for me then to specialize. We don't specialize as an MW. You have to know a broad range. It's 2 inches deep and a mile wide, but then it provides a platform for you then to like take a dive somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important for our industry that there's programs that are these programs, MW and MS, because especially as Neil talked about in the buying side of the business, it does create, it does lead to higher, jobs that it does select. It does say to the industry, these are the higher achieving people, and it does create higher paying jobs. And the risk is if you don't have those people in our industry, they're going to go work somewhere else. And the big issue now is with sommeliers who are out of work in a lot of countries. My biggest fear is that, we're going to lose people, that people are going to decide that other career paths are either more lucrative or more reliable, or whatever words you want to use. But, we want to have the brightest minds in our industry, and every single person who comes into the wine industry and is smart and hardworking contributes to the growth of the industry. And if you don't have those jobs for those people, they're going to go do other things, and we'll be poorer for them. My view of education is that it's super important, but it has to be it has to be part of the program, which has to start with passion. Like I went to a really great music school, but that doesn't make me a great musician. In fact, all the great musicians got the worst grades. And I went to a really good business school, but that doesn't mean I know anything about business, because the really talented people, they were brilliant before school. School just polished them, And so I think education, though, but I really value those experiences. I think education is really important, but it has to enrich your own internal passion. It's not I don't think it can be a substitute or a replacement. You have to want to, as Rebecca said, you have to want to travel and go spend time tasting wines. And Neil mentioned something else, which is, I think, a far greater problem, which is the lack of access to reference point wines. It's like you want to go, Neil, visit Christophe Roumier, and you've tasted his Bon Mar for God knows how many vintages, or his Musigny for God knows how many vintages, or Josh is probably the most active person tasting Rhone wines in the world right now. So like you want to go to Chave or whomever, and like you've tasted every single one of their wines, or Rebecca for New Zealand, or Eric for Italy, or Joaquin for Argentina, Chile. It's like, and that no degree can give you that. In my opinion, that's just consistency of spending time in places.
I mean, I would like to add just a line about that, because here from the bottom of the world, it's very difficult to get those degrees in, for example, in the UK. So I would love to, for example, take one of those courses, but it's not extremely necessary to become a journalist or a critic. The thing is that you need to walk the road at the end. Maybe it takes more time, but if you have the will, you can do that.
So there's some really hopefully some good perspective. So Neil, we have a couple questions around Burgundy. One is, as Burgundy is getting warmer, what's your take on the stylistic fight between reduction versus seduction in the Côte de Blanc?
That's a good
question.
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's something I've sort of talked about. If you read the Chablis report, I sort of dwelt on this in that there's this kind of these two philosophies. You can look at the growing season getting warmer, so the wines are getting more seductive with all those like subtle tropical tones and very kind of maybe easier to drink. But then maybe that loses the sort of intellectual aspect of the wines, the minerality or the tension, or wines that may be difficult to taste when they're young, but with age turn into something amazing. So, you know, and then there's a sort of economic aspect to that as well. Like you want, you know, wines that people actually drink and buy again. And so, yeah, it's at a very interesting sort of phase at the moment. I, as a critic, for me, and I've written this, is that I like to have that intellectual aspect to my wine. So sometimes I'm very conscientious of a wine that's very seductive to drink, but so is Coca-Cola. You know, doesn't mean it's the best beverage in the world. So, you know, sometimes I want something that makes me think and is maybe more difficult to understand, but I personally find rewarding. And that's not the same for everyone, but that's just how, what I think elevates one wine above everything, above all the rest, you know, that aspect, you know, so that's my broad take on it.
But it's interesting, in Burgundy, you know, you sort of have the vineyards that you have. And in other parts of the world, we see this big, because of climate change, you see a whole shift in where people are making wine, like Joaquin wrote about in his latest article.
Exactly.
But this is also true in, you know, places like Sonoma, where, you know, when I first started getting into wine, it was all about Russian River Pinot, and now it's all like, you want to show people that you're literally like 1 foot away from the Pacific and the cold part of the world. And it's quite interesting how much this is changing the dialogue. And you can get English sparkling wine, you know, a short bike ride from your house, which would have been unfathomable, you know, when we started writing about wine.
You're really obsessed by that, Antonio, aren't you? You still can't, since I've ever told, I think you.
I'm annoyed because you said, "Oh, I just went for like a short drive down to this winery."
Yeah. Next time you come to England, we'll go to a winery, and you know, you can see what it's all about.
Yeah, obviously deeply intrigued, as you can tell. Anyway, it's changed a lot about where, you know, where things are. People wanting to plant higher up in the mountains or close to the ocean or whatever. So it's a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things there. Well, there's this question. It's kind of tricky hot potato, but you know, usually we don't talk about politics, but it's about what might happen to our industry in regards to tariffs with the new incoming administration. And I'm not sure anybody knows the answer to that, but I think that the president-elect seems to have shown a different approach to foreign relations, and you know, hopefully these trade issues can get resolved, and these tariffs won't be such a drag on the business. You know, for people who don't know, when you clear wine in U.S. customs, you have to show up and pay the tariffs to get the wine out, and not every importer has that kind of float, that kind of bank account. You can just show up and pick up your wines and also pay the tariff on top of that. And so the risk of that is that you're creating, first of all, that's very harmful to small boutique importers. And we need those people because they bring in small producers that maybe are not of interest to the big guys. And then, you know, right now, I think we have enough challenges as it is. So, you know, why we would want to create that is, you know, hopefully those tariffs will at some point go away, and that should be a nice stimulus to our trade, our business, which I think really needs those wines to move.
Totally.
Yeah.
Buying 2018 white Burgundy after Neil's report was very painful. Very painful.
Yeah. So maybe we'll talk about with a really great. This is a really great question. It's right at the end, but I think it'd be great to get everybody's take on most exciting under the radar region or category.
Most under the radar what?
Region or category?
Yeah, that's nice. That's a very good question.
I'll go
From my
first.
point of view,
You go
yes,
first.
yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Muscadet.
Rebecca goes first.
Group Communale Muscadet. I'm going to hopefully write about it this year. Oh, well, 2021, sorry. Yeah. Aged on lees for 4 to 5 years. Tastes like an aged Chablis. Muscadet still super, super cheap. No one's still drinking it. It's a new category, and it's just been recently established with several village appellations. And I think there is real reason to look at Muscadet again. So I'm hoping that I can write
Okay,
that.
Muscadet makes me hopeful for the summer.
Aged Muscadet on leaf.
Aged Muscadet. Josh, what about you? Most under the radar?
Not so much under the radar, but Saint Joseph in the Northern Rhone, because particularly around Tournon, right near across from the Hermitage Hill, you have the town of Mauve, for example. There are really only 4 producers in Mauve, led by Chave, of course, but they're all excellent. I think the standard of quality of Saint Joseph, particularly what I call the southern part of Saint Joseph, just above Cornas, is fabulous because you have a few specialists where that's their thing, but also you have almost most of the producers, I'd say a lot of the producers in Cornas also have land, again, nearby. That's where all the heavy granite is. And you get a lot of, kind of not real crazy about the phrase look-alike, but you can see a lot of the quality of Hermitage in a really top Saint Joseph from right across the river. When you're looking at those vineyards, if you're on the Hermitage Hill, you're staring straight across at the best Saint Joseph vineyards, and you're talking about 25 cents on the dollar. So yeah, and people are starting to catch on. The top producers like Gonon, for example, the prices have doubled and tripled. So that's a little unfortunate. But if you kind of step away from the big names, obviously Chave Saint Joseph is a benchmark. Gonon is a benchmark. You can really find some fabulous buys, less than half the price of Cornas, 1/3 to 1/4 the price of Hermitage, half the price of Côte-Rôtie. I think it's a really good spot to look at. And the whites are interesting as well.
When does your list, Josh?
Eric?
Hi, sorry. Puppies barking, packages are being delivered. Okay, under the radar. Wow, looking at Italy, I mean, come on, there's so much, right? I'll just name 3 things that come to mind immediately from a recent report, Chiava. I mean, like, beautiful wines. Refosco, what it really comes down to is looking at a lot of the varieties that are just not the first ones to like come from people's lips, how many Refoscos I've had that have reminded me so much of my favorite Northern Rhone wines, beautiful wines. But then if we want to talk about something like Sangiovese, Prodapio, Romagna, I mean, like, it's under the radar, absolutely. Great wines that just people aren't drinking because we just need to get them in front of them, Sorry for the puppy.
No, it's cool. I think it goes. Wanted to get
Quite happy.
Joaquin?
I think that the coastal range in Chile, it's a bit underrated if you just picture Chile itself. And it's developing quite fast, specifically from reds, Grenache, for example, some Syrah too. It's a cold region with granitic soil, so they can sharpen much better. And there are very focused producers there, like Bouchon, for example, or for example, Guillemot. So I think if outside of Argentina, I will pay attention to the coastal range in Chile. It worth a taste.
Okay. Neil, your turn.
Yeah, there's a small region in France, I think it's big, called Bordeaux. It's full of like very, very kind of very rustic place, very sort of poor winemakers, trying to make a living. And I think that could become pretty big in the future. I'm hoping so. So, you sort of heard it here first. And apart from that, I would say the top South African whites are still, for me, undervalued, completely exciting, world-class, and they're going to be amazing. Like, kind of, I think in the future, people are going to look back and think, why didn't I buy more of those top South African white wines? That and Bordeaux.
That and Bordeaux. Well, I wasn't going to mention Bordeaux because I knew you would, but Neil, but I think, I don't have your wit, not by a long shot, but seriously, every year I think, and I think you would agree, we taste so many wines from Bordeaux that are inexpensive and flat out delicious. And yes, everybody wants to know about the superstars on the left bank and the right bank, but some of these satellite appellation wines are really beautiful. Let me see if I have a bottle here, but I tasted a Fransac that was 15 years old the other day, and it was just absolutely beautiful. Is it going to, change your life kind of wine? Well, probably not, but it certainly aged a lot better than I would have thought had I been writing the review when that wine was produced. And so I think that Bordeaux has a lot of these really beautiful wines that are delicious, young. They can age at least moderately, and they're really affordable. And then, the other thing I would add is, one of the articles I wrote this year was Chianti Classico. When I looked at the prices for the straight Chianti Classicos, $20 to $25 for a lot of these wines. I think one of the frustrations for us consumers is that so many wines have become so unaffordable. Josh, when I go out with my parents, when I was like in my 20s, I would order Saint Joseph and Cornas in restaurants,
Yeah, I mean, I was 20. I remember when I was 25, one of my first big serious meals when I moved to DC was a restaurant called Jean-Louis Paladin. And I went with my now wife, and we drank 1978 Clap Cornas, and it was $41.
Yeah. So that's what I used to wear. I would drink those wines when I'd go out to dinner with my parents at these nice restaurants. And so I think for readers who have kind of old world kind of sensibilities, a lot of these wines have become really expensive. And when I wrote the Chianti Classico article this summer, and I looked at the prices, I thought, wow, so many of these wines are sort of still in the mid-20s, and they're beautiful, and they'll age midterm, maybe not 30 or 40 years, but at least 15 to 20. And they're really affordable. And so I would say those two areas, satellites of Bordeaux, Chianti Classico are two ideas, but I think we got it.
I was extremely, very impressed. Talking about Chianti Classico, I used to sell the wines of Castel and Villa, and your review was so great. And I got email offerings for that for like $23.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah, 2016, great vintage, reference point producer, and it's under $25. And the number of places in the world that can give you that, and that wine is a 20 to 25 year wine, if not more.
Easily.
The number of, I'm sure there's places in Spain and there's places in South America that I don't know, but when you look at the sort of the classic regions of the world, there's just not too much that's going to fit into that fits those parameters. I think Bordeaux does for sure, obviously, some things in the realm, but it's not a very long list. So anyway, that's why I thought of Classical. But I think we're up for time. We're actually a bit over, but we could, it's just great to have everybody on and to hear everybody's opinions. I want to thank our readers for these fantastic questions, our team for an amazing job this year. And, we're wrapping up 2020, 2021 is going to be a phenomenal year. So thanks everyone. Happy holidays. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Christmas.
Cheers.
Merry happy holidays.
Yeah. Happy holidays to all of you. And
Ciao.
see you
Thanks for watching.
in 21.
Appreciate it.